Eamon Khan here for Seconds Out with top trainer Shane McGuigan. Shane, before we get into the boxing action this weekend, you've got a bit of a double whammy in terms of the sports events in your marathon run attempt. You told me a little bit off camera that there's a bit of a hitch, but you're going to get there. How are you feeling for it?
No, yeah, I've got a little bit of a niggle in my calf, but I'll be all right. Hopefully by Sunday it'll all calm down. But yeah, I've done some good preparation for it, and I'm excited. You know, it's my second marathon, and I went sub-3 in the first one. And I want to try and go sub 250 in this one, but we'll know probably a couple of miles in if that's going to be a 2:48 marathon or a 4-hour one. I'll be hobbling my way around. Either way, I'm going to get it done.
What is on the playlist for the marathon?
Nothing. I don't listen to music, so. No.
I think you said in your videos on the channel that you've got to make it as boring as possible to get into the mentality to get the best out of yourself, right?
Yeah, I just think when you're trying to race for time, a lot of the time you don't really want to be on music because it can offset you, and also it's just a distraction really. Like normally you'll get in, I do a lot of halves and 10Ks and stuff like that, so you sort of get into a group and none of them are listening to music, you're all sort of just pacing each other. So I think marathon running, if you want to do it semi-competitively and do it for time, but I think a lot of them don't really listen to music. But I will in training ones, I'll listen to podcasts and stuff like that, but yeah.
So is it a bit of a get in and get out job on Saturday because you've got to rest for the marathon on the Sunday?
Listen, that's my hobby. I'll never rush my actual job for a hobby. Do you know what I mean? It's something I'm passionate about. But no, this is a massive priority for me with CBS. It's a huge fight for him, and he really needs to be focused and switched on. And you know, once we get that job done, we can get everything sorted. And as soon as we leave the change rooms, it'll be down to me to just rest up then because I'll be getting to the venue. It's really early start, so you get to the venue about 7:45, and then the wave I'm in is 9:30. So yeah, I'll be going out at 9:30. So, but the most important thing is CBS.
Link in the description if you'd like to support Shane's cause on his marathon run. Getting into the boxing chat, I've seen, I don't know if you're a betting man by any means, but the odds have been shortening on Brandon Glanton for this fight with Dorton Smith. How has Chris approached the preparations differently from other fights?
As in shortening, as in getting closer. People are, yeah. Well, that's only normal. I mean, a lot of people tend to do that. They listen to people's talk, and he's a very confident lad. And I think, you know, we know exactly what he's going to come to do. He's going to come to try and take Chris's head off, and many people have tried that before, and they've all, like, not all of them, but a lot of the people that really think that they're going to knock him out come unstuck, and that's what we're planning on Saturday night against Brandon Glanton. So yeah, Chris had a good preparation. You know, it's a trial and error now with CBS with his. We don't want to put too much intensity into the sparring stuff, but I feel like we've got enough sparring. We've had some good sparring partners over, and he's more of a veteran of the sport. Even though he's only had 20 fights, it's just you know, he's 34, and I want to preserve him as much as possible. And yeah, he's done a lot of his learning. He's been a pro 8 years this summer, and they've all been with me. All of the years have been with me, so I know him very, very well. He's still got plenty left. He's not, you know, on the decline. It's just he's not physically on the decline. Mentally, it's hard to come back from a loss. Mentally, it's hard to come back as an undercard fighter. So these are the questions that need to be answered for CBS. But he's done everything he needs to do in training camp.
Yeah, how do you suss out any fighter, but Chris specifically, that the fire is still burning after being the momentum just going up and up and up, and then obviously you get the fight against Zerdo just dropping because of the defeat? How do you suss out that Chris has still got that ambition to get back up to the top?
Yeah, it's mainly the training, but also fight week, how excited they are. You know, there's always going to be a money drop whenever you lose your world title and you're boxing for a unification, so it's not the same reward. You know, he's not getting shortchanged or anything like that, but it's just not what he wanted it to be, because if he'd have beat Ramirez, he would have been gone on to almost an undisputed, you know, or not, because obviously Baddy Jack's now come back, but against Opatea. So there was huge fights on the horizon for him, and it's like, it's quite hard to sort of pick yourself up from that. But I think I wasn't sure, but ever since he's come back into the gym, same old Chris, he always striving for extra percentages, always looking for a little bit more. And yeah, that's literally that's all I could ask for. And I think, you know, it's not been that long since that last fight, but I think if he was to let it go too long, sometimes then you could fall into bad habits or take your eye off the ball. Obviously, he's got a little kid as well, so that's probably the hardest thing for him, just to get away from his family, get away from his home, to come out and train again. Do you know what I mean? Get back into the gym and get stuck into it. And obviously a dad myself as well. I mean, that I know if I was to have lost my world title, and then that's the biggest factor. And he's answered that. He's done it every week. He's been in the gym for 11 or 12 weeks. So I can't ask for more.
Being direct about Brandon Glanton as the opponent, does he possess anything you haven't seen from previous opponents that Bill Smith has faced before?
Yeah, of course, every fight is different. He's got the punching power of probably a punching power of a React-Paul, maybe not quite as a sniper-like, but he throws more combinations, and he wants to hit you more. He's shorter, it's a completely different stature, so it's going to be a hard fight. It's going to be a big ask, but that's what this world level boxing is all about. You get to that top end, and you don't want to go back down to British level. You've got to stay there, and this is a hard fight, but I think it's a fight that Chris can win, and I think if he gets it right, he can stop him.
So with that said, how does he do it? Is it a late stoppage sort of thing? How do you think he breaks down Glanton?
We'll see on Saturday. I don't mean to, we will see on Saturday. I think the speed of Chris is going to be a factor. He has to be consistent. Glanton's very consistent with his attacks. He's puts, not one pace, but he puts a good pace on, and I think he caught up with Egorov at the end of the fight. Even dropped David Light in the 10th. So he's a guy that sustains his work rate throughout the rounds. But with Chris's speed and his combinations and his ability to fight short and mid-range, I think that's something that Glanton hasn't seen before.
What did you think of Dorton Smith's performance last weekend?
It was an underwhelming performance, but I don't necessarily think it was for a lack of his progression. I think it was just more of a horrible fight. The guy didn't want to know, and those opponents are really hard to look good against.
Did it change the perspective, shift on the Azim fight, of course?
I've always been very, very confident about Adam Azim, not just winning the fight, but I believe he can take Dorton Smith out. I've seen chinks in his armour, just like they probably see chinks in Adam's armour. I know the guy that I'm working with, and I think Adam's attributes will be too much for Dorton Smith, but it's probably swung things into Adam's favour, just like him dropping Zepeda swung it into his favour. Do you know what I mean? It's just, we will only find out when they're in against each other, and hopefully they go in there and they get a chance to fight for a world title against each other, and it's for a lot of money, and the hype's still there when they get that chance.
I shouldn't forget, of course, Lee Cutler fought last weekend too. Very despondent after the fight was called off. Those last 2 rounds, he felt like could have been swung in his way, but the call for the rematch, I think, is going to be allowed from you guys.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, I don't train Lee, but we manage him, and I feel like Josh has done a great job with him. He's still there's still a working relationship. It's still a progressive relationship. It's just very frustrating. He boxed the wrong fight a little bit, gave away too many rounds, but he said he felt very comfortable in there. He felt like Eggington wasn't hurting him. But you got to win rounds, because at any stage of the contest it can be stopped. What we're annoyed about is the fact that it was clear that Lee Cutler, the left eye was the eye that the fight got stopped on. That was opened up by a punch, and then the right eye was opened up by an accidental clash of heads, which would have then gone to an accidental clash of heads after 4 rounds is complete, goes to the scorecards, and the person who's winning the fight at that time wins the fight, or it's a draw if it's a non-contest if it's before 4. But it wasn't. It was the fight that was stopped on the cut that was opened up by a punch, and that's what we're going to have to appeal, because. And if that was the case, then Lee Cutler wins the fight. And also, we're just very despondent at the fact that the scorecards, I mean, it was clearly and very obviously a very competitive fight. Lee was coming back into it. He won the first, got into a bit of a bad rhythm, gave away too many rounds, then he won the 6th, 7th, 8th, and then the 9th was scored. But obviously it was 2 seconds, so they took all of the cards, scored it at 10-10 because there wasn't enough time. So that was not in effect, that round. But one judge had it 9 rounds to 3. Do you know what I mean? So it's he gave him 2 rounds, I think, and a share of 1. So which is just shocking, really, because it's you ask for a fair shake.
Get to the main event talk for this weekend. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. First of all, the big talking point about Eubank Sr. He said he's not going to be in the corner. Just your thoughts on that?
I think it would be damaging for Eubank Sr. to be in a corner at this stage because of their relationship and the fact that it's been so fractured. It could only just cause chaos and distraction, and I don't think he would add much to the corner. I think he would have added a lot to the camp, and he would have added a lot to the build-up if he was given the opportunity to do so, and also wanted to be involved, but he hasn't. So I don't think he should change anything on fight week. And if he hasn't been around, he shouldn't be around, which is a shame because it's I've got a great relationship with my dad. Conor's got a great relationship with his dad. Ricky and Campbell got great. Most people have got a good relationship with their dads, and that's something you'd want to see. Them working together and simultaneously.
I asked this of your dad, and I want to get your perspective on it, because when you were obviously coming through the amateurs, you had your dad in the corner. Did you find strength in that? Of course, with Daniel Dubois, he had his dad in the periphery as well too, and he seems to be drawing strength off of that. What does it do for a fighter to have?
Yeah, Adam Azim's got his dad's around a lot. I liked it because I liked having my dad around. Obviously, I felt like he had a lot of knowledge, but I think even someone like Josh Pritchard, when he was boxing, he had his dad coaching him, and even though they might not have been the main coach, it was just that sense of calm and comfort. I think it would make more of an effect for people that are younger, in their amateurs and early 20s, and as they get older, they become a bit more independent. Someone like Daniel's not independent. He still lives at home, so that's why that's such a big asset for Daniel Dubois. Whereas Eubank Jr. has been away from his home for a long time. His dad's lived out in Dubai, he lived in Vegas, he's gone all over, so I'm not sure if it's as beneficial for Eubank Jr., but I enjoyed having my dad around. The only problem with that is sometimes Eubank Sr. always talks about his 19 world title fights. My dad's not as bumptious, but he also had lots of world title fights and got to a very, very good level in the amateurs and the professionals. So a lot of the time this is the way to do it, rather than you're not me. And I brought in a guy called Lee Pullen, who worked with me when I was in the amateurs, and he was a massive help because it gave me a different perspective on boxing, and then obviously just merging that in with my dad. But I think sometimes they can. Eubank Sr. is a massive puncher. Eubank Jr. is not a massive puncher, but he's a very good volume puncher, and I think Eubank Sr. sees. Remember when he was beating Spike O'Sullivan and he was beating Nick Blackwell? I think that's when he looked at his best. Even Andy Ilder and things like that. When he was coming through, up until the George fight, he put all of the emphasis on intensity because he knew he wasn't a one-punch knockout artist, so he had to work at a threshold, at an intensity to sort of grind guys down and throw lots of punches, and he was tough and he had a good chin, so he was able to do that. And Eubank Sr. knew that was what he lacked in his career, so he emphasised that. So that was a good synergy there. But since he's moved off, I just don't know if he's got that same intensity. He's sitting back too much. He's being a bit lazy, and it might be costly in this fight.
Do you still reserve judgment on a prediction until you see Eubank Jr. on the scales?
No, I just don't think it's at the top level. You know what I mean? I don't think either of these guys are world level yet, and it's great that they're getting paid more than most unified world champions or undisputed fighters get a chance to get paid. And it's great that all of this interest is there. It's just almost, I think when it's at top end boxing, I think your bets are a bit more safe and your predictions are a bit more safe. And sometimes when they're slightly below that level, they have hit and miss performances, and one of them could have a hit and miss performance.
Just talking about Conor Benn, who's coming up the weights, one weight, two weight, whatever way you want to look at it, but is it as big of a danger for Ben as it is for Eubank Jr., do you feel?
The danger isn't the fact that Eubank's making 160, it's the rehydration clause. Yeah. He's been doing 160 a lot for a long time. I do think he should be a super middleweight at this stage of his career, because by the time he's 35 years of age, I think your body thickens out, and just those last few pounds is just a little bit too much of a push. But nonetheless, he's made 160 in his last fight. He made the 160 in the fight before that. So it is going to favour the guy that's able to fuel the performance. He's the guy that's going to be able to fuel his training sessions and work. This is the thing about boxing. Any other sport, because it's all weight governed, we don't fuel ourselves properly. We undereat and we overtrain, and then injuries happen and performances slip. But if you're a runner, or if you're a tennis player or a footballer, you train hard and you fuel that performance, and you eat a lot of food and a lot of calories and a lot of hydration and all of the carbohydrates, all that sort of stuff, to basically enhance your sessions. And that's something that Conor Benn's been able to do.
Last thing, that weight that Eubank Jr puts on from 160 to 170, and then whatever he puts on from the morning to the fight walkthrough, is it quality weight? Can he hold on to that, or is it just weight that he puts on to get to the weight? Or might it be the case that it just comes off of him, or is it quality weight?
I'm not a fan of people putting on too much weight, to be honest, even from the weigh into. I mean, if he's waking up at 170, and by the time he goes into the ring he's like 173, that's a good weight. I don't think he should be much more than 173. That's 13 pounds. That's a lot of weight. But if he's used to putting on 176 or 178, then that's a different story. Do you know what I mean? I remember Lucien Boussy was boxing Froch, and I had a fighter on the undercard, and they were with the IBF, and Froch was an IBF world champion, and his coach ran up and down the stairs about 10 times. He was weighing himself to make sure, because in the UK you've got one chance of making that £10 limit or underneath the £10 limit the next day, and if you don't, then you can't win the world title. Whereas in America you get an hour, so you can win. You can almost like sweat yourself down to the £10 and then move on up. So they were making sure like he was just under it, and it was like 168 to 178, and the scales were flickering, so he made the weight, but at 178 he still looked cooked, because he's not used to boxing for that title, and as soon as he's off them scales, normally he would have gone way heavy. I don't think Eubank Jr is used to doing that, so I don't think it's going to be that much of a factor. It's just the age might be a factor. That's the only thing.
And I appreciate the break. I could speak to you for a lot longer, but you've got other commitments apparently. Thanks for being the Seconds Out, and best of luck for the marathon.